to introduce this session about the geopolitics of global energy transition. We'll have a diverse session with four presentations that explore the global energy transition issue in different regions and with different approaches. Because we are very strict with the schedule, I will move directly with the first presentation, and we're gonna have Mr. Sayed, Professor Sayed, which is assistant professor at Sharif Policy Research Institute, SPRI, at University of Technology. I think is in Tehran, Sayed will present Iran-China 25 years agreement and energy implication. Sayed, the screen is yours. Please go ahead with your presentation. You have 15 minutes, and I will give you a buzz at 3 minutes to go before the end of your session.
Thank you very much. In this research, we try to investigate the possible issues or possible costs and benefits in front of Iran and China in order to develop a 20-year deal for economic cooperation with each other. And in this presentation, we want to investigate or put focus on the energy sector. First, I want to briefly look at the China and Iran profile. China is a high energy dependent country, specifically with regard to its developing industry sector, and oil and coal have still a significant portion for the energy basket. As a vacuum cleaner, China would have a very large demand for downstream products, because in the manufacturing sector, by which China has a high portion of exports to other countries, the downstream product is very crucial for this sector, and especially for their strategic program, which is called Belt and Road Initiatives, in order to have access to the markets. China has developed an up-to-date technology in several companies in both upstream part and downstream part of this sector. For example, PetroChina, CNOOC, Shangjichang, and Sinochem is one of some of the important companies in this country. Also, I should say that China has a very large basket of investments outside of the country in energy sector, especially in Middle East and North Africa. China has spent more than $150 billion in energy sector, mostly in petrochemical plants and refinery plants. On the other side, Iran is one of the largest energy reserve not only in the region but in the world. Around 1/3 of known gas reserve is in Iran, and in combination of oil and gas, Iran is in the second rank. But due to the U.S. sanction after the revolution, the U.S. sanction had a long-lasting impact on energy sector and put pressure on the energy export of Iran, both on upstream and downstream sector. And China, for two reasons, is capable to cover this need. First, China has good financial competencies to invest in these projects, and second, it has a limited political disparity or political challenge in the region. And so, on the other side, from technological, logistic, and financial situation, China is a big player in the region. And so, because of these two reasons, China is able or capable to invest in energy sector of Iran. Uh, the other two important factors in Iran is that Iran has high energy consumption per capita due to the energy subsidies. You may know or you may not know that currently the price of a car fuel or gas for car transportation is around 10 cents, $10 and it's very low, even comparing with Iran's neighbor. On the other side, because of these subsidies, industry is not up to date, and there is not good technology in manufacturing sector or cement sector or steel sector in Iran, and there is high energy intensity, and it's not acceptable. Uh, so, reviewing the characteristics of China and Iran, we can identify some grounds for cooperation between these countries. First, finance. Iran has recently introduced the IPC contracts, offers interesting opportunities for specifically upstream. Before Trump's signed the order to quit JCPOA, Total, Shell, and CNPC came to Iran and signed the contracts to invest in upstream due to this IPC contract, and this can be um, revived hopefully after the JCPOA come into track again. Uh, Iran also planned some, let's say, industrial city for petrochemical and refinery plants, which is supposed to build in southern part of Iran, near the Persian Gulf, to benefit from water or other logistic benefits there. The second part would be technology. There are many different and brownfields needs to be renewed or needs to be repaired for brownfields and for greenfields to be invested. So there are lots of technological needs, cracking or EPC or stuff like that for upstream, and for downstream. We see, most importantly, in 5 or 8 years ago, there are some young knowledge-based companies in Iran, uh, shaped by young graduates, and these companies are very good options or choice for shaping joint ventures between Iranian parts and foreign counterparts. The market between China and Iran, as I told you, China is a very good customer for downstream products, specifically for manufacturing sector. And Iran needs to secure its output, and these can be done by some sort of long-term contracts for oil, gas, and petrochemical products. Just a quick note here that for uh, downstream products, both Saudi Arabia and the United States have recently developed a very large number of plants, and this would be a grant for competition in China market, and this would be also a ground for cooperation. Uh, I, I want to highlight very important notes about the legal, let's say, concern here. Since extraction of oil around 100 years ago in Iran, there are lots of change in fiscal and legal frameworks for investors. Uh, 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 it started with a concession from a Darcy contract, turned into joint contract after that, thereafter to service contract, and finally, what IPC resembles is some sort of production sharing. So investors need to know what sort of fiscal and legal frameworks is working there, and because investors need some sort of firm decision to come into a project. We have also identified some socio-political constraints apart from the economic grounds for this cooperation. First, Iran learned that after JCPOA specifically, Iran learns that the special relationship with China should be kept. Um, Misleadingly, Iranian leaders forget China after JCPOA signed, and I read in the reports that this time uh, should not in this time Iran should not forget China for the second time, and because of that, this deal is being pursued by Iranian leaders. Um, there is also, if we separate the negotiators other side of the table with Iran, we see two blocks. We may see two blocks. The one block is E3 plus the United States and I mean Germany, United Kingdom, and France plus United States. And the other side, we may see China and Russia. So if Iran wants to proceed with China, there are some sort of China-Russia disparity. So Iran should kept good relationship with China, with Russia. Uh, Currently, China is the biggest Iran trade partner, and with this deal, it should be consolidated some sort, specifically in energy sector. Um, no
Three,
one have.
3 minutes to go.
Okay, thank you. No one knows about the cultural difference and also similarities between Iran and China, and this is very special to be considered in business, and also legal barrier, as I told you, in specifically in terms of framing a good and long-lasting fiscal regime should be considered. uh, Reviewing the text and reviewing the articles and reports, we reached some recommendations. First, China and Iran should have two-way dependency to each other. Uh, that's why we propose a framework with four dimensions: financial, legal, technological, and market. And if the countries drops one of these dimensions and or one of these pillars, the deal cannot be long lasting. Uh, Public opinion matters. And currently, more specifically in Iran's side, there is not a good or optimistic view to this deal. And if this deal is going to be happen specifically in energy sector, which is sort of a nationalistic sector for Iranian people, the trust building should be considered. The deal should focus on small and medium companies, because the big companies is a matter of or subject of political disputes at global level, but the sanction cannot be easily imposed on small and medium companies. Uh, and uh, in accordance with cultural and socio-cultural situation, the universities and elites can play a role in order to shape or follow the deal, and also to consolidate the deal in business sector or in public opinion. I'm done.
Thank you, Sayed. Thank you for keeping up with the time. Perhaps some participants joined the conference, the discussion just after I posted that we have 2 or 3 minutes for question and answer. So if there is any question, please type it in the Q&A chat at the bottom of your Zoom page. But I can't see any question right now, but I do have a question, if you allow me, Sayed. So my question is, are there already interconnection, so energy exchange, in particular energy exchange in terms of, I don't know, gas and oil pipeline between China and Iran? So are you already exchanging and trading oil via pipeline, or is working via ships?
No, there is no pipeline here. There is a plan to build a pipeline, a gas pipeline between Iran and China through the Afghanistan. But
Mm-hmm.
the main concern here is the security concern,
Sure.
because Afghanistan is not stable in spend such huge investment there. But the question is still on the table, but no, that your answer is no.
Yeah, okay, because typically a long-term commitment in terms of energy exchange is sort of crystallized with infrastructure investment and bind the two countries for many years to come. So this is what happened, for instance, with Italy, in Italy, with Russia, with Libya, with Algeria. Once you have the infrastructure, then you are binding your energy exchange for
Yes,
20,
we have
30, or 40
experienced.
years.
Yes, we have experienced it with Turkey. With Turkey, we have pipeline, gas pipeline, and that's why this pipeline keep these two countries close to each other. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so if we have no other question, I will thank Said for
Thank
this
you very much.
presentation. I see a Q&A. There is a question from one of the participants, Eleonora de Sogus, that is asking if there is any, if you expect any consequences with the new Biden election. So are you expecting that the situation will be easier in terms of trade and partnership with other countries? You have
Uh,
30 seconds.
yes, yes. Actually, definitely yes. And Iranian leaders expect Biden come back to JCPOA and let investors to come and invest and spend money in energy sector. You may know that Iran public budget is highly dependent on oil revenue. And oil revenue before Trump quit the JCPOA was around 2.5 billion barrel per day export, just export, not production. And currently, this amount is only 400,000 barrel per day. And you can see just this difference put a huge pressure on public sector in Iran, and there is a significant budget deficit which is translated to inflation, and the inflation put pressure on public opinion or ordinary people or middle class people. And Iranian people expect that Biden come back to JCPOA and the energy sector come back to normal operation.
Thank you, Sayed. And I'm afraid we have to close your presentation here and your Q&A session here. Thanks. And we'll move to the second presentation by Olga Garanina. Olga will present a paper about energy transition in Russia. What are the implications for natural gas? Professor Olga Garanina is a associate professor at the Graduate School of Management at St. Petersburg University, and she's active on international oil and gas markets and international political economy. Olga, as for Fayed, you have 15 minutes. I'll play a sound 3 minutes before the end of your session. The screen is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Do you see my screen?
Yes, very well.
Okay, so I will start then. This is a paper which is devoted to the analysis of the role of natural gas in Russia's energy transition. As all of us know, that natural gas industry is a crucial industry for Russia. And the paper is co-authored with Silvana Mima, who made the modeling part and who is with Grenoble University, Grenoble Alpes University and CNRS. What we cover in the paper, and this is a brief summary of the main parts of our research. So I will start with the short introduction, and basically we intend to assess, to study the role of natural gas, and we make a modeling part with polls, and we analyze the Russian gas demand prospects in different scenarios. And then we come up with some conclusions on the Russian gas production outlook and Russia's natural gas prospects. So to start the presentation, so the starting point is that in the very recent years, Russian policies tended to shift towards, I would say, greater engagement with the global climate change policies. So in 2019, Russia ratified the Paris Agreement with the pledge to reduce the emissions to the level of 70-75% in comparison to 1990 by 2030. So this decision from one of the major fossil fuel producers seems to result from several motives, which are both political, as foreign policy agenda and international participation in international climate policy agenda has been traditionally stayed as important part of Russian foreign policy. But there are also concerns on climate protectionism risks issues on behalf of Russian trade partners, with the example of carbon border adjustments in the European Union, or technological policy risks. So Russia has to catch up with this policy trend. So in this paper, we study what is happening in Russia, and what we observe and what we also have to acknowledge is that, yeah, Russia is one of the largest emitters. So Russia is the fourth largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, and However, Russian emissions today are about twice less to the level of 1990 due to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and which this makes the Russia's targets hardly encouraging. So Russia seems to, on one side, Russia seems to move towards the more stringent climate policies. On the other hand, it's a major fossil producer, and it is obviously lagging in comparison to other countries in terms of the, let's say, level of stringency of climate policy targets. So will natural gas become the winner of the energy transition? And also natural gas plays versatile impacts in the energy transition because it's a clean fossil fuel, but it is a fossil fuel. So therefore, we intend to study these questions, and we apply Paul's model, which is a partial equilibrium bottom-up model of the world energy system. And we built two scenarios, and we run the scenarios to till the end of the century. So till the end of the century. So we take the reference scenario and the intensive scenario, and we adjust these scenarios, taking into account Russian targets, which are announced in the draft version of the strategy for long-term low-carbon economic development for the period till 2050, which have been announced in Russia in the March 2020. So in this slide, you see our assumptions in terms of Russian greenhouse gas emissions. So we observe a plunge of emissions following the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that's where Russia is more or less is about right now. So we have the reference scenario, which allows for increasing greenhouse gas emissions till 2050, and then we have the so-called intensive scenario, which is adjusted once again on the basis of Russia's targets, and we run it till 2100. So we run it till the end of the century. So Russia perceives the climate change as a security threat, and as I explained already, Russia is in this very difficult position where on one hand it faces the energy security challenges, on the other hand it also has to adjust itself to the climate change. So what do we observe in terms of results? Today natural gas covers slightly more than 50% of Russia's energy needs. So Russian energy mix, primary energy mix, is relatively clean as it depends on the cleanest fossil fuel. And we observe that in a long run perspective, the structure of the energy consumption will become more diversified, and Russian natural gas consumption is declining in the reference case and decline to a stronger degree in the intensive scenario, giving more place to renewables. So we'll look specifically at the consumption of natural gas as shown in this slide. We do not expect that gas will become the winner of Russian energy transition. And we observe a very significant loss in terms of the domestic market demand. And here we discuss the domestic market in both scenarios. So Russia's, as shown by the model, Russia's gas demand enters into decline as early as in 2030s, which differs from the assumptions of Russia's current energy strategy. So this risk of shrinking gas demand creates stranded asset risks in the domestic market, and we observe this decline in both scenarios. So we have these blue columns which show the trends for the reference scenario and the orange columns for intensive scenarios. So in both cases, we do not see a bright future for natural gas, and this is due for several reasons. So on one hand, if we look at the sectoral consumption of gas, we observe the decline of gas consumption in the electricity sector, we observe the decline of gas consumption in both scenarios in the industrial sector and in buildings. So the only sector where we could expect some increasing potential for natural gas demand is the transportation. However, it is not enough to compensate for the gas demand decline in other sectors. And then we briefly cover sector by sector the gas demand prospects, and we observe that the gas demand constraints in the electricity sector are explained by several reasons. So firstly, if we discuss decarbonization of the power sector, Russia has several options, and natural gas is one of the several options in terms of decarbonizing the power sector. So Russia could modernize or existing capacities or build new efficient capacities. However, the market is quite well saturated with gas power plants. So increasing efficiency of existing plants could decrease the gas demand potential. Then Russia also has a lot of has quite a strong potential in renewables, in particular nuclear, and also in longer term solar and wind, nuclear, solar and wind, and also hydro. So in the electricity sector, in long term till 100, we observe that the energy mix is getting more diversified, and we observe quite modest, let's say, trends for the decarbonizing in other sectors as well. In industry, we do not see the strong market demand expansion potential with declining gas demand in case of the intensive scenario. We have some prospects for gas consumption in the transportation sector, which is supported by policy regulations that favor, especially in the case of Russia as a major oil and gas producer, that favor natural gas as a transportation fuel. And we expect the rising share of electricity, which becomes the winner of the energy transition in the residential sector. So therefore, to sum up, I do not have much time. I would like to have more time to present. So we do not observe a strong market demand potential in the case of the domestic market. So what does it imply for Russia's production? Usually in Russia, we consider that demand, the gas production is demand driven, that basically Russia has a lot of gas reserves and where its production is predefined by the level of the gas demand. And we observe a huge variance in terms of production scenarios. So in the reference case, Russia's gas production explodes, especially after 2040s, and Russia, due to its reserve abundance, remains as the main global gas.
3 minutes to go.
And this requires to put in production Arctic gas fields. Also, this requires to put in production the shale gas fields. However, if we assume the intensive scenario, which is based on the 2-degree climate policy, so 2-degree type of scenarios suggests that Russia is close to the peak levels of gas production around nowadays, around 2020, and we expect the production decline in the next years. And here is the outlook for exports. So in the reference case, most of the production growth is devoted to the export markets. And we expect rising gas consumption on behalf of emerging economies. And we expect that Russia-EU gas dependency will gradually decline. So Russia's exports will be more diversified, and more directed towards rising gas consumption markets, which are in particular Chinese markets and Indian market. And on the in the intensive scenario, exports are declining. Russia, EU, so European Union is this part in yellow. So Russia-EU relations are shrinking, and Russia's exports become more diversified, and this makes it important for Russia the of its LNG exports. So LNG strategy in this case all the cases becomes extremely important for Russia. So another issue which we do not, is also could be important. So we observe high stranded asset risks for the case of Russia in case of a stringent carbon policy scenario. So this could make hydrogen an interesting vector for Russian industrial policies. So Russia announces its interest and engagement into hydrogen economy as a producer of hydrogen based on methane. However, we do not observe it yet in our model. So I'm now going
yes, please go to the conclusion.
Yeah, this is also my timing as well. Yeah, so we do not see it in the conclusions, in the results, and also the climate consequences of methane-based hydrogen are also questionable. So yeah, this is my last slide with the conclusions. So therefore, yeah, Russia needs to put in place policies aiming to account for these expected changes in the energy mix, which are not yet fully explained, translated in Russia's regulatory framework. The value of gas as a provider of flexibility during the peak load should be valued. And also, yeah, in the industrial sector, the gas demand should be also supported by industrial competitiveness policies, in particular with the export-oriented sectors. And yeah, so gas also has some potential in the transportation sector, which is, however, relatively limited in comparison to the gas demand decline in the other sectors. So yeah, and overall, we cannot say that gas is a winner of Russian energy transition. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Olga, and thanks for your presentation. We have one question from Honorata that is asking, how do you define the energy security in Russia, for Russia? I think you have a slide about that, but you can just answer this question.
I will try to answer it briefly. So in Russia, I mean, what I say is my personal opinion. So in Russia, I can refer you to the official paper, which is the Doctrine of Russia's Energy Security, which was published in 2019, which observes the efforts to limit the climate change as a threat to Russia's energy security, given that oil and gas account for roughly 40% of our budget. And also, the energy security of Russia is also threatened by rising competition in fossil fuel markets and rising share of renewables in the global energy. However, so I mean, Russia accounts of these challenges arising from international markets, both in terms of strengthening climate policy effort and also rising competition in the fossil fuel markets. However, if we look at another policy document, which is Russia's energy strategy, and our energy strategy nowadays goes till 2035, we still account on the growth of fossil fuel demand. So this the energy strategy is still based on the assumption that in the next few decades, fossil fuel demand will increase, and especially natural gas demand will increase. So our strategic frameworks is aimed at exploring the rising opportunities of gas demand growth in the emerging markets. We expect that the gas demand growth will increase, and these are basically the figures, the expectations which are stated in our energy strategy. So we do not expect huge increase of gas consumption domestically, and we intend to increase our presence essentially in the markets of liquefied natural gas.
Thanks,
However,
Olga.
in longer term, as shown by our model, in longer term, however, we have a lot of uncertainty given that gas favors negative impacts of decarbonization policies, of carbon neutrality policies.
Yeah. Olga, thanks. I have one question, and I will quickly ask my question is, what's the fate of coal generation, of coal-based electricity generation? Because in your projection, I don't see the coal electricity generation declining very sharply. I was expecting something more radical. As you might know, we have in Italy, in Europe, so almost everywhere, a no coal generation policy. But given the relevance of gas in your country, I was expecting that the first fuel to die would have been the coal, not gas.
Coal is difficult to be buried in Russia in social and political terms because Russia is a huge country. So probably in difference of many other countries, Russia is extremely huge and extremely diversified in the also in the economic and geographical sense. So most of European Russia is covered by gas power plants. And Siberia largely relies on coal plants. So that is the first argument. So we have a lot of coal in Siberia, a lot of coal reserves in Siberia, and therefore we need to monetize the coal. And then also that's a question of jobs, employment, etc. So that's the first argument. So most of Siberia is essentially covered by coal and hydro. Yeah. And there is also a second argument is that in Russia have cogeneration plants. So also contributes to cogeneration plants to heating, especially during winter periods in Siberia. So it's extremely difficult to rapidly phase out coal. And in Siberia, we do not have gas infrastructure. So basically, if we phase out coal from Siberia, we need to build the gas infrastructure, and it's a capital-intensive project. We cannot do it that easily. So there are, I mean, there is a bulk of social, economic, political, reasons that constrain the shift away from coal. And in Russia, also in the gas, we have a lot of cogeneration plants. So we have to carbonization.
Thanks, Olga. Sorry, I have to cut you here. It's very interesting, but as I mentioned, we need to keep up with the schedule. Thanks for your presentation. I'm sure we can find some other time to discuss this issue even more. And we now move to the third presentation of today. By it's understanding variation in the governance of fracking, and the presentation is by Professor John Graham, who is professor at the School of Public and Environmental Affairs, Indiana University. John has held a number of very, very prestigious position with the George W. Bush administration, and he has published extensively on this topic. So I understand John doesn't have a PowerPoint presentation. So John, the screen is yours. You have 15 minutes for your presentation, for your discussion.
Thank you very much. I want to acknowledge my co-author, geologist John Rupp of Indiana University, and alert you that my topic is about public acceptance of new technology. Why are some new technologies embraced and why are others stigmatized? This, of course, is a long-standing question of interest to social scientists, and obviously of intense practical importance. Today, I will look at the relatively new set of technologies used in unconventional oil and gas development. Horizontal drilling and multi-stage hydraulic fracturing in combination, sometimes loosely referred to with the unflattering term fracking. I want to compare the governance of fracking in 3 European countries, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, with 3 United States, Texas, North Dakota, and Pennsylvania. The theoretical prediction arises from the risk perception paradigm in cognitive psychology. Technologies in this paradigm are not judged by actuarial or scientific risk. They are judged by qualitative attributes of hazards that are in the minds of human beings, whether they be real or whether they not be real. And you look at specific attributes, like how familiar is this technology to ordinary people? Are the hazards that are imposed by this technology, are they imposed on people without their consent, or do people voluntarily accept these hazards? Can multiple people in a community be harmed by this technology at the same time? Do you see clustering of harms and if you do, you raise more perceived risk? And does this technology in some sense threaten future generations for welfare compared to alternative technologies? So what does this risk perception paradigm predict about public reactions to fracking? It argues that the public will, in general terms, have heightened perceived risk and seek protections from fracking. In France, I will start with the first case study. In 2010, about the same time that the US and Canadian companies were exploring fracking techniques in North America, the French government under Sarkozy allowed exploratory wells to be fracked at several locations in France. It certainly was a sensible idea. France was 99% dependent on imported natural gas, so domestic production was something that could be appreciated. But a catalyzing event occurred right during these exploratory drilling, and that catalyzing event was the release of an HBO documentary entitled Gasland, where US families living near fracking wells suffered from drinking water contamination. Social media spikes occurred around the world when in February 2011, Gasland was nominated for an Oscar. Local government officials in France were shocked because they were not even aware that fracking of wells was occurring in their communities. And this was nothing that was done illegally. The French government was aware that these were done under research permits, and under a mining code law at the time, local communities were not expected to be informed of research activities. This, of course, irritated local officials in France, and then Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth seized on the situation to increase public concern about the development of fracking technologies in France. And they argued that multinational corporations, some of them American corporations, were bringing fracking technologies into the French culture. They launched a national campaign to stop fracking before it began. At the same time, the industry with interest in France didn't put a lot of effort to defend fracking because it was not yet clear geologically what the actual commercial potential was, and they didn't want to put lots of money into a public relations campaign for something they weren't sure of its ultimate value. This was an exploratory activity. So they relied on the government to defend fracking against the charges of the environmentalists. But it turns out this public rebellion against fracking in France, Sarkozy was not in any appetite to actually take on this rebellion. He faced a tough re-election bid in April 2012 after he had won in 2007 by less than 7 percentage points. Sarkozy hastily issued a temporary freeze on fracking in February 2011, and within 6 months, the French Parliament had banned fracking. I'll be briefer about Germany and the UK because the basic stories are the same in their ultimate outcome. In Germany, the same pattern of events occurs, except it didn't happen quite so quickly in Germany. And the script was more complicated by the fact that there were Russian interests who were working in the German government on the idea that you can get your natural gas from Russia. You don't need to have your own fracking program in Germany. In the UK, it was a much different path to the same ultimate outcome. Offshore oil and gas drilling in the North Sea had been declining for a decade, and hydraulic fracturing had already been used in the North Sea. The first license was issued by the government of Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown. The program was expanded by Conservative Prime Minister the Cameron government, and a test drilling proposal in Lancashire met with stiff local opposition. The concerns were not meta issues like climate change, they were local issues like heavy truck traffic, ecological damage, the cost of water pollution and air pollution in the local communities, and site noise that would disrupt residents and communities. Despite extensive public opposition, the central government of the UK insisted that the license be granted, and it went forward. In April and May of 2011, the small earthquakes occurred near the drilling site. Not of a magnitude to be of harm, but they were certainly surprising and startling. Neither the government nor the developer had any concept that this was actually going to occur. The Cameron government issued a temporary moratorium to figure out what the seismicity issue was and how to solve it. After several months, new controls were devised to minimize seismic risk, and seismic monitoring and management plans were installed. The Cameron government then lifted the moratorium and actually added a 10% revenue recycling back to local communities where fracking occurred. Nonetheless, in the summer of 2019, another seismic event, this time larger, 2.9 magnitude quake, caused houses to shake, but without significant damage. The Conservative government of Prime Minister Boris Johnson terminated the fracking program at this point, arguing that it could not demonstrate significant commercial value and the safety could not be assured. So even though it took a lot longer, the same ultimate result happened in the UK as happened in France and in Germany. So the risk perception paradigm provides a good basis for understanding the prohibition of fracking technologies in Europe. But how about the United States? How do we find that this population is not subject to the same concerns and fears of the European population? Indeed, the decade from 2010 to 2020 witnessed a boom in oil and gas production in the United States, stimulated by fracking. The US surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia to become the #1 oil and gas producer in the world. And much of this progress occurred in 3 states: Texas, North Dakota, and Pennsylvania. Before saying a few words about those 3 states, let me make 2 comments nationally about how the difference is in the US. First, mineral rights and royalty income in the United States are very much designed to allow property owners to earn money from leasing their property and the mineral underneath their property for extra income. So it would not be uncommon for a person to lease their mineral rights and earn $10,000 or $50,000 per year for a nearby fracking site. And this is something that's not typical in Europe, and it's not even typical in Canada. As a consequence, you have local economic interests near fracking sites that are strongly in favor of fracking, not simply environmental concerns about those fracking operations. The second thing is you have a national political leadership in the United States, both Democratic politicians and Republican politicians who were strongly pro-fracking. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and now Mr. Biden. For those of you who follow our campaign politics, you'll notice he was very careful to defend the use of fracking on private land as part of national energy policy. Let me just say a few words then about the 3 states. In Texas, fracking technology was never considered a new technology. It was considered a refinement of existing conventional technologies, and the same permitting processes used for conventional oil and gas drilling were used for fracking technologies. The Texas Railroad Commission, which is the regulatory body that oversees oil and gas development, entered into permitting processes immediately and expanded them without having to have any new environmental impact statement, since this was not, in fact, a new technology in the eyes of the regulator. Local opposition did develop in some communities, again, for intensely local concerns, truck traffic, noise, and nuisances. But the state legislature in Texas adopted a preemption provision which did not allow local communities to decide for themselves, and they were doing so in part to protect the private property interests of mineral rights owners. In North Dakota, you have a different situation where you have a state with no recent history of oil and gas development. However, you have a state that is comfortable with resource development. It has a big coal sector and it has a big agricultural sector. It ultimately becomes the #2 state in oil production in the United States and experiences a boom in their economy due to the development of oil, particularly oil production from fracking. The Pennsylvania story is a little different. It used to be a very high producing oil and gas state early in the 20th century, but since World War II had not had any significant production. But ultimately, under Democratic governor 2003 to 2011, several thousand fracking wells were launched.
John, 3 minutes to go, sorry.
Yes. And significant progress was made. There was, however, a serious mismanagement that occurred in Pennsylvania. And this is the management of the flowback water that comes to the surface after you frack a well. And this flowback water oftentimes has significant concentrations of natural contaminants like radionuclides and other toxic contaminants. So the question is, you're at the surface, you have all this flowback water, what do you do with it? In Pennsylvania, they allowed it to go to public treatment works, which are not designed to handle these types of contaminants, and that led to significant surface water contamination. But notice, this risk from a risk perception paradigm was processed in Pennsylvania as a mistaken policy of unscrupulous developers, not something that would cause a ban on the technology as a whole. The solution was to take the flowback water, separate it out, and truck to Ohio to deep well injection sites the contaminants that needed to be addressed through deep well injection. So ultimately, you now have a very successful fracking program in Pennsylvania. And in fact, in 2018, $243 million in public revenue was generated from the fracking industry. And $130 million of that was funneled back to local communities around Pennsylvania where fracking occurs. So you can see how the political constituency for fracking can develop as the industry grows. So I want to conclude just by noting the sharp contrast between what happened in North America and what happened in Europe. I didn't get into Canada, but the story in Canada is also very strongly pro-fracking. What are the future of fracking technologies? Well, I certainly do not know for sure, but the climate change issue will complicate this considerably. On the one hand, the development of natural gas as an alternative to coal has been a tremendous positive for CO2 emissions in the United States. On the other hand, the development of fracking for oil has caused reductions in the global price of oil, which is increasing oil consumption compared to what it would be in the absence of higher prices. So I think very much the future of fracking technology is unclear in light of the climate change considerations. Thank you very much, and I look forward to comments and questions.
Thanks, John. Also, because I think it must be very early in the morning where you are in this very moment. So thanks for set your alarm very early today. We have two questions, one from Honorata She is asking if you can assess the development of fracking in Poland. And I will give you also the second question, which is by, well, it says Fazel, but it's not Fazel, as we know. This is Sayed. And if you can elaborate on the banning on fracking by Mr. Biden, and what do you expect from the new presidency, as this is a very hot topic. It was a very hot topic during the election time. I have to ask you to be super quick, please.
Yes, on the Biden topic, to appease environmentalists, he supported a ban on fracking on public lands, but that represents only about 10% or 15% of fracking in the United States. He made it very clear, campaign in Pennsylvania, that he was in favor of fracking on private lands. Poland, I don't know the details except to say that there were some efforts to engage in fracking in Poland. They were not commercially successful. I don't know how much is continuing today, but I do want to remind people that in Texas, it took many of the developers 10, 15 years to successfully frack. It's a trial and error process, and many countries who don't think they have commercial value because they drill a few wells and they can't find anything or it doesn't work. You have to really engage in a sustained effort over a long period of time to be successful with fracking technologies.
Thank you, John. And we need to move to the next presentation, but thanks for keeping up with the time and for your interesting discussion. So now we have the fourth presentation of today's program, which is by Ms. Lyubomira Gancheva, hopefully I pronounced it okay, from Sofia University. The presentation is about the opportunities to ensure affordable prices and security of natural gas supply in Bulgaria following the commitments of Gazprom export before the European Commission. Briefly on Ms. Lyubomira background, she's currently a business development and relationship director at a FTech, Ketten and Finance Bank, and she has a significant background in energy economics. Lyubomira, the floor is yours. Well, the screen is yours. As always, you have 15 minutes, and please keep up with the time. I will give you a signal at 3 minutes to go.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First of all, just to check whether you see the presentation and hear me well.
Yep.
Okay, so great. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today it's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to present in front of you research I've been working on for the past few months. And the topic, as you can see, is the opportunities to ensure the affordable price and security of natural gas supply in Bulgaria following the commitments of Gazprom export before the European Commission. Just a moment, as I cannot change the slide. So I'll just do it like that, because otherwise when on share screen I cannot change the next slide. So the aim of my study was to research how the end result of the antitrust case which the European Commission has led against Gazprom export for the period between 2011-2018 could help Bulgaria benefit by means of two topics: affordable price of natural gas and the security of supply. As you may know, the antitrust case was initiated by the European Commission because of suspicions that the Russian company was abusing its dominant position on a number of countries, including my home country, Bulgaria, and was violating the two treaties of the functioning of the European Union. And by the end results from the case, there were some commitments that the Russian company has taken, and they are believed in the European Union and in the energy audience, they are believed to significantly change the way the Russian company is operating on those markets. And for Bulgaria, affordable price of natural gas and security of supply is extremely important because, on first place, we are strong dependent on sole supplier so far of natural gas. Bulgaria is receiving its natural gas mainly from Russia. By saying mainly, I mean 98% of the total natural gas for over the last 5 years. On second price, the security of the natural gas is important, but the price of the resources is even more important for Bulgaria because we are the poorest country, unfortunately, in the European Union, and 1/3 of the people in Bulgaria suffer hardly from not having the opportunity to pay their bills for heat during the winter season. And last but not least, it's very important in the European Union, the policy of the energy transition and the Green Deal, and the natural gas is believed to be among the key tools for achieving the goals. So therefore, I studied scientific literature, I studied the political strategy documents on both European level and national level in Bulgaria. I used the statistical data which was available, and what is more, I made like my own research based on the official documentation of the European Commission, who is checking on the prices of the natural gas, in order to see if there are some trends and how the assignments and how the way Gazprom Export and the European Commission worked on this case affected countries like Bulgaria. And last but not least, I make the recommendations for the future strategy of a small country like Bulgaria, which can be useful for all European countries. So my research question was, did the commitments that Gazprom Export made before the European Commission in fact had any change over the affordable prices and the security of natural gas supply in Bulgaria? I had three hypotheses, and I worked on the hypothesis that yes, they impact and they ensured those opportunities. By means of the literature, I'll try to be brief so that we don't have any time, but I studied all the, as I said, I studied all the political documents of the European Union, and I saw the way that on political level, on strategic level, the idea of the common European energy market changes over the years and comes to the conclusion. I studied the Bulgarian practice in the field of energy strategy. I briefly studied all the official information on the Gazprom Export and its policy for export mainly in Europe. And I also studied all the political documents of the European Union and European Commission on the dependence of natural gas imports from Russia, and also the political impacts and the political speeches on that, because as we know, not only economics, unfortunately, but also politics and geopolitics affect the way decisions are taken, and in European Union as well. My second topic was to study the antitrust legislation of the European Union, and to study the case of Gazprom, which is believed to be the case from European Commission against Gazprom, which is believed to be one of the most important one in the EU antitrust law. And the empirical models I discussed, so I studied the prices of the export of natural gas, as it is believed that those prices and the price convergence as a whole across the member states of the Union is one of the clearest and the more explicit and important signs of the integrated and well-functioning market of natural gas in the European Union, and therefore it shows if there are barriers to trade or not, and therefore through the prices of the natural gas you can see the different areas in the European Union, and you can see where there are barriers for new suppliers for a country, where they are not, and how the change of the price in fact coincides with the amendments in the trade policy of Gazprom Export after the antitrust case. So all those researches that I made, as well as I said, the European Commission is preparing over the last 10 years a report on the export prices of Gazprom Export, and I took that report, made a statistical model how it is changing through the case, and all of the researches, all of the information that was public and that I could see all showed one and the same, that during and after the end of the antitrust case, there happened like what I called it price equalization within the European Union of the natural gas supply prices in the long-term contracts with the main supplier. I also saw that Gazprom Export at the end of that case started changing its 25 or 30 years long-term contracts at one the same time with changing the price the supply price of natural gas and making it connected with the price of the hubs of Western like TTF index or other Western gas hubs and gas trades. So this is an image of the countries that were mainly affected during the antitrust case, and that's the measures that Gazprom proposed to remedy the competition concerns. In my study, I made like 4 different types of countries. On first place, it was Poland, because Poland was the largest in Central and Eastern Europe, the largest client of Gazprom Export, and it had its own case. I specifically studied it, but now I'm short of time, and I would just say that Poland managed not only to decrease the price with Gazprom Export, but also to invest in LNG and in other diversification resources of natural gas. Then were the countries Lithuania, Litva, and Estonia, where they were like a little bit like Poland, but more softly, and they worked a lot on their interconnection, as well as receiving the LNG from the United States, and therefore they managed not only to increase the diversification, but to lower the prices with its main supplier, Gazprom Export. I didn't study so much those 3 countries because the European Commission said that the prices were pretty fair on a market basis, and there were also only problems with integration. And last but not least, of course, I studied the Bulgarian case. So for the Bulgarian case, what I saw was that for the period when that specific proposed measures was public, from that period, Bulgarian company, it is a state-owned company who is the client of the natural gas from Gazprom Export. It's called Bulgargas. Bulgarian company, it decreased its price with the Gazprom Export, and this is the figure to show the decrease of that price for a period between 2015 2016. That's the only public data, and I can see that that change was derived on the final price of that company to its clients. So we can make the conclusion that the antitrust case, it implies and it affected the change of the price between Gazprom Export and Bulgarian gas, and that was stated in the policy documents of Bulgarian gas and the Bulgarian government as well. This year, in March, was negotiated a new mechanism for the pricing, and it's on monthly basis, something which is very new from Bulgaria. There is a hybrid formula, as I said, which include petroleum components and the hub price. And the first country in the European Union, Bulgaria, was the one to have a retroactive action. So on 2020, the price for, let's say, September 2019 was changed with a retroactive formula, which was something interesting, but the European Commission was a little bit skeptical on that, and Borchardt from the European Commission wrote a letter to the Bulgarian government saying it's a strange case, and unfortunately with this retroactive action you cannot have the change on the price, on the final price of the clients. So Bulgaria, to sum it up a little bit, Bulgaria was the last to finalize the agreement with its Russian partner. From all the 8 countries concerned in the antitrust case, was the only country where the price was reduced, as I said, retroactively. The price was reduced after the heating season, and as I said, in Bulgaria, the energy poverty for that period was the highest marked in the European Union as a whole, and the final client, could not receive any specific amount from their bills to be realized as the reduction of the price, and the amounts recovered, it's very difficult to reach the end users, unfortunately. So based on that model and seeing what the other 7 countries from the antitrust case did, I prepared a proposal for a government-based policy on the European energy in Bulgaria, which for me should include the following things to be done on a daily or a monthly basis. And it may seem strange for you, but unfortunately there is no public information, there is no public policy document in Bulgaria stating that those steps are done not only on monthly basis, but as even once in a year, which is a pity, of course. So I do believe there should be constant monitoring of the natural gas, the fuel oil, and the gas oil prices on the markets in Europe. There should be continuous forecasting on the domestic consumptions, because usually in Bulgaria you can see the domestic consumption like 4 months after each month. You can see them post, but there is no forecast. And when you don't have the forecast of the price of supply and the consumption, you cannot optimize the conditions with Gazprom export. The public supplier, I do believe, in Bulgaria should purchase larger quantities. And for example, we can see that now Bulgaria started purchasing the largest quantities from Gazprom export, but now the price is increased like 2 times. And in March and April, the price of TTF, for example, was 20 euro per megawatt. Yes, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do believe there should be negotiations regarding the so popular take or pay clause under the long-term supply with the Russian side. So far, Bulgaria hasn't done any of this. There should be the diversification, but it's very important to be based on the lowest price. And now in Bulgaria, diversification is not an expert used word. It's only on political usage. And they say we will diversify like 1% on 3 times higher price. That's not the point. There should be monthly analysis and forecasts in all the other 7 countries that were affected by that antitrust case. There were such analysis and forecasts. In Bulgaria so far hasn't been any. There is a very important Balkan gas hub, very important idea for a market for the natural gas of Bulgaria. We've been working on it for a decade. So far nothing happened, unfortunately. And I do believe there should be a gas storage. Bulgaria has worked on this, but no results, unfortunately, as well. And I do believe that all of the largest projects for infrastructure should be done on time. This is extremely important, not only for Bulgaria, but for the Balkans, because we see a lot of strategic projects for diversification and even gas pipelines with Russia, which are planned. The region is working on them, but none of those have been entered and has been opened in time. And I do believe that all of those reasons mark it up and sum it up why the antitrust case was very important for the European Union in order to have a gas energy supply and affordability of the price. But there are a lot of steps still to be taken in order to take out the most of it. Otherwise, we should see just like small changes, but not in the big picture as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Lubomira. Thanks for your presentation. Very interesting. A lot of aspect that we can discuss in the Q&A session. We do have one question, and I'm sure there can be more. One question from Olga Garanina, our fellow panelist, that's asking what is the impact that you can foresee for the market share of Gazprom in Europe and in the Bulgarian market after the EU Commission case?
I can just say more clearly for Bulgaria that there was no change, no significant change, because as I said, in Bulgaria the long-term strategy was to have a big pipeline and to create a company called Gas Hub Balkan. That company, Gas Hub Balkan, should trade on a VP, virtual point of sale, VPS, and the new infrastructure was supposed to be built by the end of 2019, and it would have helped Bulgaria to have the diversification of the resources of natural gas. Up to date, none of those 2 projects has come to an end, and so therefore in the recent 1-2 years I cannot see how we can diversify and how therefore the share of market of the Russian supplier could change. There is the idea of having different sources of natural gas in Bulgaria and in the region, and I have seen efforts in 2019 from US point and the US LNG. However, there were such small quantities that I do not see the idea and the possibility of a significant change over the next 1 or 2 years. Up to now, there has been more like investments, there has been ideas, there has been policy papers, but on practice, there wasn't any significant change in Bulgaria, and I would say pretty much on the region, the Balkans, so far.
Thanks. That's interesting. And I have one question,
Yep.
which is you provided some recommendation, policy implication of your analysis, which is on greater transparency and also to provide more information to users and to the market. But if the situation is what you say, that there is no alternative basically to the Russian supply, what are the viable solution in the short, medium term? So is there any serious program of diversifying the supply with, I don't know, renewable energy sources or diversifying routes from other gas export countries? How do you see that this situation is going to change in the medium run in Bulgaria, even if it allow for more transparency and more and greater availability of information for market players?
So on first level, if by the end of the next year the large gas pipeline would be connected, we call it Balkan gas pipeline. It will provide the opportunity for example, from natural gas from Azerbaijan to enter the gas infrastructure of Bulgaria and then to Serbia and on the north side. So that's one point. The other is, as I said, we have idea of a trade, natural gas trade, which is called Balkan Gas Hub, and it will be like a regional gas hub for the Balkans, something we see in western part of the Europe, which has been developing. Last but not least, Bulgaria this year started initiative and acquired 20% of an LNG. It is in Greece, an LNG hub where we can take the LNG from not only from the US but as well from Russia, from other resources. So there will be an infrastructure for that diversification. And your question on the energy transition was very interesting, and I do believe there should be on a government level, there should be more adequate precautions and more adequate policy papers to be taken on Bulgarian energy level, because nowadays what is said here in Bulgaria is that we will definitely change our energy mix, but there is no idea of how to change it. And in Bulgaria, not only the natural gas is popular, in fact, we have now it's an opportunity, but in a decade it can be a problem. Coal mining and the electricity from the coals nowadays is about 40% of 40% of all the electricity is from coals, and there is no idea how that will change in the next decade. For example, yesterday I saw that Poland will close its coals by the year 2038. In Bulgaria, there is no such information, even though it is briefly talked that the coal factories and the coal energy stations will be closed. And in case that they are closed, that means that for the 1 or 2 decades to come in Bulgaria, the natural gas should increase, because there is no other way to have energy security and to have the energy supply on the balance.
Thanks, Lyubomira.
Thank you.
I think this is interesting, and I thank you all the panelists. I thank all the panelists for your nice contribution to this session. A couple of final remarks, and perhaps we have 4 to 5 minutes, so we've been very good with the keeping up with the time. The final remark is obviously for discussion, is that on this session on the geopolitics of energy, we have discussed issues that have been raised almost all around the fossil fuel supply. So apparently, or at least in this session, there is no geopolitics linked with the new renewable energy sources. Do you think, so this is my question for you and this for discussion, do you think the new renewable energy sources are too young to have started any geopolitical discussion, or they are sort of so local, so they present such a strong national content or regional content sometimes that they cannot init any of these geopolitical aspects that are instead very popular when we discuss about coal, oil, and gas? I don't know, we only have 4 or 5 minutes, but I don't know if you have any thought about this aspect.
Let me just make a brief remark, not so much on the geopolitical aspect, but here in the state of Indiana, when I arrived 12 years ago, 96% of our electricity was from coal. The latest measurement I saw was moving below 50% with rapid growth, not just in natural gas, but with wind particularly. And the growth, the affordability of the renewables has improved dramatically. And it's basically wiping out coal, and it's also eating into natural gas expansion. So I think you're going to see, I see no reason why this has to be different in Indiana than it would be in a lot of countries in Europe. There has to be tremendous renewables potential. So unless there are barriers to the expansion of renewables that are erected by public policy to prevent its expansion, I would think you have to be predicting lots of renewables throughout Europe and even in the poor Eastern European countries.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Any other consideration and comment? Please, Olga.
Comment probably on the case of Russia. So for Russia, when we talk about energy, we talk also about technology. So in the case of Russia, Russia sets several partnerships and promotes development of wind and solar. And what is critical in the case of Russia, technological independency, local content policies. So Russia privileges not only the development of alternative energy itself, but also related technologies. So we cannot avoid the question of technological independency. And also when we talk about renewables and clean energies, we also have a huge potential and uncertainties in terms of nuclear. So for Russia, it's also, I mean, it's obviously a geopolitical issue also.
Thanks, Olga. We have 2 more minutes.
I want to highlight the point by Olga about the local content policy. We have also the same problem in Iran, both for solar and wind energy. There are some barriers specifically for foreign investors. When they want to come and invest, they are faced with some rules and regulation in terms of promoting the local contents, and the deals is gonna be stopped. And this is the problem for countries like Iran.
Thanks. And I see, Lubomira, do you want to also to comment, please?
Yeah, just in one sentence, unfortunately for a small country such as Bulgaria, we don't have so much the resources for the renewables. We don't have the technologies, and I do believe that keeping in mind that the price is very important in Bulgaria, over the next decade, the nuclear would be very important for Bulgaria. We have a plant called Belene, which is in the process of production. So I do believe that the nuclear will give the possibility of those aims to be met, and to have like the transition not only to happen smoothly, but to be inclusive and to be on bearable prices. Thank you.
Thanks. So before I close this session, we have one comment from the floor from Onorata that I thank for being very active member of this discussion. She was saying that because of the geographic availability of sun and wind, obviously the problem is very different between renewable and fossil fuel. And I totally agree with that. But as we discovered today, and perhaps some of us already knew, there are some technological content which is binding and halting the development of some technologies in specific market and specific countries. So it was a very interesting discussion. I thank you all for being here, being time, and for your contribution to this session. We can close this room and follow the other presentation of the program today. Thanks a
Yes,
lot.
thank you, Alessandro. Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for the attention. And I wish you all a good day. Thank
Have
you.
a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Ciao.
very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.